Welcome to the K-State Insiders, your Kansas State sports show. Now, let's head into the studio.
Welcome to this special edition of the Insiders, even though it is Monday. It was nice of K-State to schedule the introductory press conference of Casey Alexander right before we do the Insiders every Monday. Fitz, Big B, Gills, and in the studio with me today, Cole Carmody. It's kind of hot in here.
It is a little warm.
Yeah, this studio is right next to the furnace, and it gets hot.
Well, you guys look at you, Fitz. Look at Cole. Why would it not be hot in there? Come on.
That's true.
Come on.
That's true. So there's a chance Cole and I will be naked by the end of the show, but don't let that alarm you. It's a new day of Kansas State athletics as Casey Alexander was announced as head coach just a little bit ago at the Shamrock Zone connected to Bramlage Coliseum. And I was impressed. I warned people that if he doesn't win the press conference, it doesn't mean a damn thing. But Gills, I think he won the press conference. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, here's the best way to put it. He didn't lose the press conference, right? It wasn't lethargic. It wasn't lacking energy. I wouldn't say he hit a home run the way Jerome Tang did, but Casey Alexander is not trying to win you over. He's going to put his head down. He's going to work. He's going to put together a coaching staff, his players. He's going to put his head down and work. And to be quite honest, I don't think he really cares about winning or losing a presser. He was himself. He was natural. He's going to go out and do his thing. That was my kind of opinion on it.
Yeah, he knows what he wants to do. He's going to pick up and start doing the same things he did at Belmont with great success, and try to build a culture at K-State. Cole, your thoughts?
I think that he knows what it takes to win, or at least what it took to win at Belmont. And he was very open with, hey, this is how I won at Belmont, and this is how I'm going to win at Kansas State. I thought that was interesting. And Gilbert, you brought up hitting the home run in the press conference. Like, I don't really know what he could do to hit more of a home run. Like, he was himself. I think that was the most important thing, is he was very open about what he wanted to do and how he was going to do it. I know we'll get into the specifics with that. But, yeah, I mean, it was refreshing to hear someone stand up there and talk about basketball the way he did. Like, it wasn't super, super big picture. It was like, I'm going to win, and this is how I'm going to do it. And I thought that was pretty cool.
Agree.
Yeah, I mean, look, I didn't think we were going to learn a ton about what he's planning on doing, but he's going to keep some of that, for himself and for everything else. But for the most part, I thought it was a great first impression. First impressions mean everything to pretty much everybody, and I thought it was a good first impression. The guy is likable. Not that anybody's not likable, but the whole thing about it is, look, if we're trying to build and change the culture, you at least got to win the press conference. It's one thing. Don't get me wrong. You can be an ass and still change the culture, but it's nice when a guy apparently isn't, and they're looking to change the culture.
Yeah, that gets a little more difficult at Kansas State if
Yes,
you're hard to get along with, because K-Staters are typically very welcoming. And there was a pretty good crowd there. I'll say this. I think Gene Taylor did a remarkable job in an environment right now for hiring a coach that isn't the greatest. There's so much going on in college athletics, but it just we've seen a drop off of mid-major Cinderella stories. And be honest with yourself, that's how you define a good coach from a lower level, so to speak, is what do they do in that one stretch of the season? Well, you can look at it as the totality and the number of 20-win seasons he had. But here's where I think I'm most impressed with Casey Alexander. He's been on the giving side of the portal. Every year, he loses 2-3 top players off his roster that just helped him win 20 games. And he doesn't miss a beat because he talked about it. He's developing talent in-house. He doesn't have the money at Belmont to go shop for players and bring in a bunch of guys. So he's got to develop them. And I think that is something that obviously has been really lacking from Kansas State basketball. And I think that's something that is essential to build a culture and a locker room where guys come in and are educated by their peers on what to expect from the coach and what to do to reach his expectations. And that's just totally absent. There hasn't been enough guys to have a framework of a program. it will be interesting around Gilbert to see what he does in the short period of time, because as we know, the 26 recruits are for the most part snapped up. There's surely some guys out there still that have fallen through the cracks, or might show up later on. I don't know. We'll see what he can bring in at this point, but building that roster is job one. And a warning to K-State fans: it's going to probably have to look a lot like what Jerome Tang did in this first year. It just is. But I think he will emphasize trying to find guys that are younger that can come in and start learning the way. Belmont's top player just put his name in the portal, or plans to. And, that's the kind of guy he's been losing. Can he bring him to K-State? Well, we'll find out. He's going to have some NIL money to work with, but Gil's not as much as what I think Jerome Tang had. But still, it was encouraging to hear a coach talk about building from within instead of shopping for players every year.
The ability now, the chances of you keeping your top player from Belmont, that goes up a lot. But it's easier said than done to say, now I have this available to me, I can keep him moving forward. And we're not going to know this for years, but it's going to take time to fully find out whether or not he can keep those guys. And he mentioned it here at the introduction event that there's nobody that's an automatic no. He'll have those conversations, and if it's the right fit for his coaching staff and him, if it's the right fit for the player, they'll be back. And so, I always like to say on here, guys, Bruce Weber's squad, Jerome Tang wanted no part in that, and a couple of guys still did stick around. So it's all about the foundation, man. It's all about the culture. Of course, Casey Alexander touched on that, and it's easy to buy into everything he is saying. However, these words now, anybody can check those boxes with their words. Actions are always going to speak louder. So I'm not saying that you should jump off this ship. It's great to be excited, but give it a year or two, and then we can maybe not, judging the way he evaluates talent and puts together a roster. We can get critical on that and critique that right now, and how he coaches on the court and how he can win games. His offense, we can get into that later, Fitz. We can get on that the first time it happens. But in terms of the program, the continuity, keeping guys around, those are the things that are going to really take years. And I don't think, to go back to what we talked about earlier real quick, I didn't hear him mention national title or even Big 12 title. It was just about winning games and putting your head down and not making some sort of glamorous promise to the fan base. He did mention, to paraphrase, right, that like it might take some time to get that foundation in place, to get that culture in place. He's being real with himself. He's being real with you fans. He's not getting up on a scores table and just telling you right now to expect the win. He might have said that in a more subtle way, but he was real. He was genuine, and he wasn't going out and just saying, oh, right here from day one, we're going to win every single game.
Cole and Big B, I got to say this. He sounded prepared, but I was left wondering, is he saying things that Casey Alexander would say at any job he's hired for? Or is this a direct communication to the K-State fan base and what they've gone through with the lack of building of a program over the last 4 years?
Big B, I will say this before I throw it to you. I think that when I hear him speak, I hear a guy who, honestly, if this was 10 years ago and the transfer portal wasn't a thing, and the guys who were on the team last year would be the guys who were here this year, he'd be okay with it. He seems like the kind of coach, okay, here's my roster. This is what I got to do to coach him. Here's how I'm going to coach him up. I feel like he talked about being kind of old school at that. Like, he feels like an old school coach. Here are the players. I'm going to coach them, and whatever the results are, what the results are. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, because when you combine that with the fact that he is a pretty good talent evaluator, people who know more basketball than me have said that, so I'll take them at their word for it. I think that to me just says that he is really willing to dig his heels in. That's kind of what I took from this, as someone who, I don't want to say was skeptical about this hire, maybe more so skeptical about the pool of candidates than anything else. He felt like a very hard-nosed, blue-collar, I'm going to grab my lunch pail, I'm going to put my hard hat on, and we're going to go to work, and we're going to turn this thing around. I think that there's a time and a place for what Jerome talked about with, hey, we're going to win a lot. I think that's a good message. I don't think that would have been a good message for Casey Alexander to say, but I think he can have that conversations with his team. this is what our expectations are. This is what we're going to do. You have to have that vision if you want to be a success and be successful in any form of athletics. But it's you don't have to say that in front of your fans. And I think the message he communicated overall was pretty well received.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about it is, I don't look. I really don't think there's a wrong way to go about it. I mean, if you're confident in what you're doing, then it's
Yeah.
okay to say it, But then there's the other way is that I'm confident, but I don't have to say anything. So it depends on which way works is which way is best. You know what I mean? Because if Jerome Tang had been successful, everybody would say that that's okay for that to work. But because he wasn't, well, then that's the wrong way. Same thing in this case. It's just, it's just a different style. And, to your point, Gills, as far as, what we need to do as far as building a program, I agree. Just build the program. Don't worry about, because building the program, maybe we don't win 25 games the first year out, but if you can start to see the light and start to see a culture being built, that's what Kansas State needs. We've talked about it several times. Stability in the program. Now, don't get me wrong. You need to win. I don't care if the program's stable, but if you're winning 9 games a year, that's a problem. But on the other hand, look, and to your point, Cole, he's been losing guys every year at Belmont. Guys have left, and he still puts out a very competitive team. So because next year I would be surprised if there's more than 2 guys that are on this basketball. I'd be very surprised if there were, and that's okay. But moving forward, there's still going to be the shift. There's still going to be, losses and all that stuff. Still have to look at that. But this is a guy who's, like you said, Cole, okay, this is the roster. Fine. I'll coach them. And this is what we're going to be able to do. I'm going to exploit all the things that they do well. I really don't care because, look, I don't want to look backwards a whole lot here, especially today. But that's what we didn't get. We didn't get a lot of development. We're going to get some development with this coach. At least I hope so.
One thing, Fitz, I wanted to touch on. So Jordan Henriquez was there, obviously former player. He was on the coaching committee, the search committee as well. One thing he mentioned in talking to him was the homework that Casey Alexander did. And, he put a name to J.O.'s face and stuff like that. But you could tell there were some subtle comments. Maybe it was a total coincidence, but he mentioned throwing darts about grabbing players in the transfer portal, and you can strike gold in that, but that's not something you can consistently do. If you watch back, and I haven't watched back his full introduction yet, but there was a couple of times where I'm like, okay, either that's a total coincidence or he did his damn homework on not just Kansas State University, but the current state of where this program has been.
Isn't that too, guys? That's as much about the Power Four as it is in anything else. Kansas State is not unique in striking out on the portal. Now, not very many programs have struck out on the portal 3 years in a row, but they're not unique in striking out on the portal and not making the NCAA tournament. Look what happened at Ole Miss this year. Now, they had a nice run in the SEC tournament. Their best player was AJ Storr from KU, and that was a team who made the Sweet 16 last year and were horrible this year, right? We've seen that happen throughout all of the Power Four where, okay, a team's going to get pretty lucky, and then the year after that, they're going to fall off. Maybe the next year they'll be good, but it's hard to be consistent. I think that, I do agree that because sometimes, you know that the old saying is, if the shoe fits, then it's your shoe. That's kind of what's going on with K-State, but it's more than just about K-State in that particular instance. So I don't know. That's just kind of what I took from it.
The thing about it, look, the portal is hit and miss, but if you get the right guy doing the picking, you can win.
Right.
And that's the problem. The Ole Miss, I love that analogy, Cole, because Ole Miss, their coach is looking to get in the transfer portal. That's the difference there, is that he's been looking for a new job for the last 2 years. So it's tough when you're picking guys. Your analogy is spot on because it's not just the players that are looking to transfer portal. The damn coach has been looking to try to get out of there. So you can do it the right way. You just can't have an entire roster every single year. That's just not going to work. Or you just have the most money, but you still have to have a culture. Me and Gills talked in Kansas City this weekend, and I won't go into all the details. I go, but you can do it if you have a culture in place. But Kansas State they don't have one right now. So you need to build it. And who's to say that Kansas State's new culture that gets built is one where they value retention, retention of good players, though. So who's to say that that's not what it is? Other places, they can do it different. You look at a place like Michigan, they did it differently. But Kansas State doesn't have to do it. You can do it different ways, and I'll be interested to see which way we go. But the first thing before anything, you got to build the culture. And if you can do that, the quicker you can do that, the better.
Shout out to Cole. A good way to build your culture is getting that talent. And there's been a lot made about Casey Alexander having that eye for talent.
Yep.
You asked him, Cole, about doing that. He said, I quote, most of us can evaluate talent. The question is, does that talent fit together the way that you want it? I mean, Jerome Tang, this program has had talent. Look at Ugo Onyenso, Day-Day Ames. There's some players out there who are balling right now at their next stop, getting it to fit in your program, whether that's your own system that you have or you create a new system with a new group of players. It has to work together. So getting talent and eyeing it is one thing. Actually doing something with it is another. Fitz, I'd love to bring up this comment as well. Shout out to Cole for that great quote he just dropped on us.
Yeah, it was didn't wear it. I love it. I love it.
Well, this is March Madness time. The slipper's got to fit if you want to make a run.
Look, we all know what happened previously. There was no culture. There was no program. It was a year-to-year collection of players. So to hear a coach who's been very successful, has won a lot of games, talk about culture and how to build it. A lot of people out there, that K-Staters out there that watched that probably said, well, no, duh. But in this current state of college basketball, that's almost radical thinking, that you can't solve all your problems through the portal. What are you talking about? And if you look at the portal as something to supplement and not something to bring all your strength through, then you're in good shape. He wants to recruit high school players. He wants to develop high school players. Can you name a single player who developed under this previous staff? I don't think you can. The closest I can come is Marquise Noel, developed in 1 year magically. It was incredible. It was Jerome Tang's pinnacle as a coach. I think what he did with Marquise led him to the Elite Eight. David Castillo's gotten a little bit better, but there's still large, obvious holes in his game defensively and sometimes with fundamentals. That's going to end. The one thing K-State, the two things K-State fans really despise are a lack of effort. I don't think that's going to be a problem under his teams. He's going to be a bulldog and get after his guys. And also teams that just don't execute, play well together. Because individualism isn't part of this culture as a university. And having a guy who's worried about drawing fouls or scoring 20 plus a game, I think everyone on Casey Alexander's program is going to worry about winning the damn game and winning the next one and winning the third one and just on down the line. That's what he's done consistently. And the only way you can lose players, it's almost like if you lost 2 or 3 players in the NBA draft every year. These are some of your best players. And to continue that means one thing. Well, 2 things too. Again, he knows how to build a culture. He knows what that is. That culture exists in the locker room for players that come in new. And also, he's got this incredible eye for talent. I haven't deceived anyone about this. Brad Underwood told me flat out, this dude is probably the best evaluator of high school talent in the game. He consistently finds dudes with no or minimal offers and turns them into players within a couple of years that are playing at the power level because he developed them. So I think that's going to feel much more like a comfortable fit for K-State fans.
And internationally too. I asked him, that's a rock that it sounds like he'll at least look at turning over. Now, he mentioned close is always going to be better. And so those high school relationships nearby, of course, but you know what? This last K-State team had that flavor. He said his teams here moving forward will have that flavor.
It's important. The last two staffs, and maybe it goes back farther than that, have ignored Kansas City, have ignored Kansas. And I understand there's just not a lot of great players in the area, but when there is a great player out of the Kansas City area, you better be on them and you better not ignore them. I had a former player that came up to me talking about the young man at Illinois that came out of Kansas City and how he had seen him play and told the previous staff about it. And they said, nah, he's not good enough to play here. Well, he's now a one and done. So being a better evaluator is key one to succeeding at Kansas State and many schools. So I'm really relieved to hear him say, we're going to have classes. We're going to have like a freshman class, a sophomore class, a junior, because it was just like a hodgepodge of players before. There was no concern about how long they would stay. They only expected them to stay a year. Maybe they get someone to stay a couple of years. But even when guys were in a position to stay, they almost didn't want them. Day wanted to stay. No, I mean, we're only going to give you this much. And so as a family, they decided to move on. And, I do look at this and wonder if Day Ames had stayed his entire career, how important would that have been for K-State basketball? I think substantially important. And the previous coaching staff just didn't get it. This dude, he gets it.
What's interesting about all of this, guys, is you guys know I've been a pretty big advocate both on social media and on some of these podcasts about the school that I teach at. Shout out to Olathe North. They won the 6A state championship on Saturday. They've got two mid-major Division I players on their team, and Cameron Love is going to UMKC and Sam Simmons is going to Richmond. And I look at guys like that because there will always be guys in Kansas City that are like that. I believe there's 4 or 5 kids from the Kansas City metro area who are all Division I basketball players who are going to play at the mid-major level. And so I look at, what K-State can do in an area like that. It doesn't have to be Kansas City, but if you can go out and you can, as Casey Alexander's talked about, developing and getting these guys to get them stay together. Like sometimes, you want to get the best talent, there's no doubt, but if you can get a team together and continue to keep a team together, then the overall sum will be greater than the parts. And I think that was the one thing that I really took away from this presser is that Casey Alexander wants to get the best players that he possibly can, but he also wants to get the right players. And so it's not just about going after that number 2 overall rated transfer in the transfer portal. It's not about getting AJ DeBonsta and Darren Pearson on an official visit. It's about going out and getting the right players for your program. And he did that for Belmont. And guys, I was curious. I went and looked this up. Belmont had 3 Power 4 games scheduled from 2019 through this season. And they were 2-1 in those 3 games. Nobody wanted to play them. That's what it comes down to. Same thing that happened with Miami of Ohio this year. Nobody wants to play them because if they lose, then it's there's no point. And so I'm very interested to see how that translates because it's very apparent that he is able to identify talent that others have not, and he's been able to develop them.
Well said, Doug. Couple dudes, Ben Richardson and was it Clay Custer, right?
Yep.
At Loyola, Chicago, okay? That's not a knock on Bruce Weber or Bill Self, but that they were in your backyard and you let them go elsewhere. You didn't have a good enough eye for evaluating that talent. Now, guys, I talked about J.O. earlier. J.O. wasn't the winningest player in K-State history. He was a part of the winningest senior class in Kansas State history. He doesn't have that success that he has without Rodney Magruder, without Martavius Irving, right? You can go out and develop these guys as much as you want. Now, Day Ames, to have him for 4 years would have been great under Jerome Tang. But if you don't keep R.J. Jones and Buddy Rich, if they were the wrong recruits, if they were the wrong misses, then what does Day Ames really matter for, right? Go get yourself somewhere close by. Maybe not right here in your backyard, but I know Bruce Weber and St. Louis, Xavier Sneed, a couple guys came out from that area. You can have your roots. And I thought Jerome Tangs were going to be in Texas, and it seemed like there was some activity there, and then you just abandon it. So go find a little recruiting base, right? What's K-State, Colin Klein? Cole, help me out here. It's like 8 miles or something where they like to be around.
8 miles would be
Sorry,
that would be
8
a little
hours.
bit too close. I believe you're talking about the 8-hour radius.
Yes.
But yes.
Sorry. So
Sorry, you play it with Migo. We don't want you.
Rock Creek and Manhattan High only.
So I guess I do have, I'll ask the questions here, or this question, because, it all sounds great, but here's the thing. Coaches don't have the decisions on guys that want to stay anymore. We just talked about he had guys that at Belmont that were there and developed, and they became good and they left. What's to say that the same thing isn't going to happen at Kansas State? You could say that we want, okay, well, we've got the right guys and the guys that want to stay. But at the same time, if an offer comes, I just think we can't look at this as that we're going to have a roster. There's 15 roster spots and 10 of those are going to turn over every year. I think that's asking way too much. That is not the landscape of college basketball these days. But do you want to continue to have those guys? I think the difference is bringing in high school players. I think that is where the big difference is that you got to continue to bring in guys and develop guys. But if you think that every year that you're going to have 10 guys on your roster that you're going to just roll over every year, I think you're setting yourself up for failure because, again, as much as coaches may want that, maybe they do, maybe they don't. But I don't think that's a reality in college basketball anymore. I think his eye for talent is really in where you can go get guys, develop them. And you know what? If they're here for 2 or 3 years and then the last year they leave, so be it. That's just the way that college basketball landscape is. But at least you get those 2 or 3 years and you keep bringing those guys in. That'll be the difference because, again, every now and then you're going to bring somebody else in too because teams that are winning in college basketball these days are older basketball teams. They are not teams that are, we saw that one and done phase and that's over. You're going to get those guys, but your team didn't win. You think of like a UConn or a Florida. They're not full of one and done guys. They are full of guys that have been around the block a few times. You look at Arizona, who I think is the best team in the country. They got a couple of guys, but they're not the leaders of that basketball team. So the difference is that identifying guys that, yes, want to be program people, but also don't pigeonhole yourself into thinking, and I'm just talking about coaches and fans, don't pigeonhole yourself into thinking that, well, we should have 10 to 11 guys roll over every year, and that's just the way that it's going to be. No, it isn't. But as Cole pointed out, having an eye for talent, you can also have an eye for talent with older basketball players because I can tell you right now, the guys from Belmont or a Wright State or a Richmond, places like that, those guys are looking for opportunities at Kansas State too. They just have to be the right guys.
I'm interested to see how many people follow him. To me, that's the one thing I'm looking for. You talk about Colin Klein, I should say, has talked about being a relationship builder, and that's how he's going to keep the retention on his roster. We didn't really hear much about, how he's going to coach the players, probably because he wasn't asked that question. Maybe we should have brought that up. But, I'd be interested to see how many players do want to follow him from Belmont. That, to me, will say a lot about his ability to not just develop them as basketball players, but really start to see those relationships and kind of how he interacts with players. Because by all means, we've heard that he's a fantastic, like we talked about, evaluator of talent. He wins a lot of basketball games. I think I'm curious on the relationship side. Do guys want to stay for him and they leave because they have a better offer? Or is it going to be at K-State where they're going to stay because not only are they developing, but they also have the same or, close to the same offers that they would in the portal. And on top of that, they have a good relationship with their coach.
Gills, you were closer in the breakout session. We had the formal press conference at the podium, and then we had a breakout session against the Wildcats wall there in the Shamrock Zone. You were closer.
I was up on YouTube. Go watch on GoPowercat after this live stream.
True. I was having problems hearing. He was asked about assistant coaches. I'm going to be really honest here. We tried to do a hot board for assistant coaches. They're just, he's got his guys at Belmont. There's a former player in NBA front office. There just wasn't a lot of connections out there. So it's probably more personal connections, just like Colin Klein has executed with his staff, but we didn't find a lot. Gills, did he mention where he's at with his coaching staff?
Yeah, obviously you got to go through HR, which I'm
Yeah.
not familiar with because GoPowercat's HR is on this far left of your screen. But it sounds like it's pretty much all like he knows what he's got here, and there's going to be a good Belmont flair on the staff, multiple members. He didn't say that, but it's going to be a lot of Belmont, and I think he already knows who the rest might be. You go through this in your head probably for years if you ever think I get a bigger job, who I'm going to bring, and that's natural. Every coach is going to do that. So, yeah, I think he's got a good idea. And also back to evaluating talent. And Cole, you mentioned just his relationships and coaching. You cannot forget about the person, the human being, the character that you're bringing into your locker room. As we've seen here, one bad apple can derail your program for years. Okay, Bruce Weber in 2015, it took years to recover from one bad class, maybe even one bad guy who permeated throughout the locker room. So as long as you get the right guys and you can obviously develop the talent and eye the talent like we've talked about. But off the court, is this a guy that you want to bring into your program? That's where you can really, I wouldn't say make or break your program, but the risks, right? The chances of things going south are much lower when you get the right type of dudes
Right.
on and more importantly off the court, guys.
Well, they value playing for the coach. And most of all, something that was almost completely absent from the prior staff. Shout out to Taj Manning, because he's been the antithesis of what I'm about to say, is a connection to the university, a feel for the school. I've said it many times. I'll probably say it on tomorrow's daily delivery. You got to get players to go to in-person classes. You can't have them taking online classes. They have to be part of the K-State community, part of the student body. They need to go to campus after big wins and horrible losses and feel the expectations from the student body. And I think this team over the last 3 years in particular, were completely disconnected from the student body other than the people who showed up to their games and yelled the loudest for them. And that was a grave mistake. It will never work at any university. Whether you're building a corporate culture, a small business culture, a team culture, you have to get people that buy in, that want the larger entities to succeed, not just them. And the transfer portal culture has brought us guys who are interested in their numbers, their money, them. And I think that's the great downfall. And again, the previous staff was really good at spending money. They were really good at paying a high price to get a player. But at the end of the day, they were getting players that only wanted the highest price possible. That was their sole criteria for picking a school. And that's exactly what the basketball program looked like. Nobody was invested. There was no culture. They talked about a great locker room, and on the side we hear about locker room problems. So it's been a while. It's been a while since a K-State coach has come in and said, we're going to have a culture of winning. Because if we're going to have a culture that's passed down, I say generations, but between the classes, your freshmen you recruit when they become seniors, if they stick around, that's a powerful advocate. If they've been winning games like he's done every season, it's a powerful advocate to tell the new players, you follow our lead and you're going to win a bunch of games and be successful. And that in the end is going to pay off for you. But let me bring this up, because this has been I've heard this question more from K-State fans, and I want your guys' feedback. Big B, let's start with you. Mm-hmm. Everyone wants a K-Stater on this staff. Whether it's, you can throw out names. Shane Southwell is probably the most active coach out there right now from recent players. Is that even important? Or is it more important that this coach brings in his guys that he knows and builds the culture he had at Belmont? It's not necessary to completely know the K-State culture or played on that court to be successful.
I would say this. It only matters if you lose, because if K-State loses, fans are going to be mad that nobody from the staff, they're going to blame that for being the reason. It doesn't matter at all, because who was on K-State staff from Jerome Tang the first year? I mean, was there anybody?
Curtis Kelly with the GA.
Exactly. I mean, we know what the GAs are. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to poo-poo it.
I will say that Jerome Tang's best season had Curtis Kelly on the staff. His final 3 did not have any K-State ties. Just saying.
I mean, you could just say that, but if that really means anything, then at every stop, at every place, there should be somebody on the staff. If that's what we're saying that K-State has to be, I don't think that's what K-State has to be, because if you win and nobody's from Kansas State, who cares? All we care about is winning, building a culture and winning. So it would be nice. Don't get me wrong. It would 100% be nice, but it's not a requirement at all. And I think I think they get caught up in, well, we need somebody from K-State to teach them the culture. Well, first of all, it doesn't have a culture. Kansas State basketball doesn't have one. So what culture are you trying to build? You know, this man is coming in to build something at Kansas State. And he also is trying to build it his way, not somebody else's way or the interpretation of somebody else. That's why we brought him in to be the coach. The coach is to build something. Great. Well, yeah, he can ask enough people about what it is to be at Kansas State. But right now, I would say K-State's at rock bottom when it comes to the basketball program and its culture. He doesn't need anybody to teach him how to do that. And if he does, I'll say this: he's not the right coach. That's not who you want. You want a guy that knows how to coach, can build, develop, evaluate talent, and K-State fans will get on board with winning. That's it. Doesn't have to be somebody from Kansas State to be their fit. I don't believe so.
Well, you said there's no culture with this program right now, and that's 1,000% true. But when you look at a former player, their frustrations stem with the fact that there was a culture year after year under Bob Huggins, under Frank Martin, the first couple of years of Bruce Weber. There was culture, and there was something to be said for wearing that K-State uniform. And my biggest thing here is you need outside voices. You need different perspectives. If
Right.
you just bring in your guys who probably don't have a lot of experience at this next level in the Big 12, that's going to be tough. But just for Kansas State, right, if Shane Southwell comes in or any former K-Stater comes in who's not a part of that Belmont circle, that Casey Alexander circle, that's a different perspective that you have. Somebody who's experienced not only playing, but I know Shane's one of the few and far between who have actually coached in a power conference program, but in the Big Ten, you get that different perspective. And I want to keep in mind that, guys, when we're talking about coaches being on staff, we're not talking about as associate head coach or anything like that, okay? There's room for somebody to be a GA or maybe a step up and be the video guy. I'm not going to clamor here and say you got to go grab your right-hand man as a K-Stater, but there's room. There's so much room on these coaching staffs for at least one, I wouldn't call it outsider, because to Casey Alexander, it is an outsider. But to Kansas State University, a fan, anybody who's followed this program, it's not an outsider. Now, yes, Big B, to circle back and put this all together, there is no culture here in this program right now, but the lineage, the tradition fits. You've covered this thing for a lot more years than I have. There's winning that has gone on, and there's people that know what it's like to win in Manhattan. So that's what I would say.
Okay. I don't disagree with what you're saying, Mr. Gilbert, but I will say this. We as humans tend to be very nostalgic, right? Like everything was better in the past. Gilbert, who is your favorite music artist right now?
No comment.
When was the last time that person was relevant? They were probably the last time they were relevant is when you were having a fantastic time in your life. You were young, you were happy. We are nostalgic. And so we yearn for those days of past with things that were better. The same thing is true with, K-State needs to bring in a K-Stater to, be on the staff to be an assistant coach. I don't care if they have a K-Stater. I don't care if they have someone who's from KU on their staff. At the end of the day, if they win games, that's all that matters, because Casey Alexander, his goal is to then produce those guys who in the future we're going to say they are K-Staters, right? He wants to build a culture to where we are talking about whenever he is done as head coach, bring this guy back because he played for Casey Alexander because he's a K-Stater, right? So that to me is kind of where I am ever since. And you can talk about Frank and you can talk about Weber, but really what we're talking about is late Frank and early Weber. After that, there's nobody else who is qualified enough to serve on a Power 4 staff. And so I understand what you're saying, but I just think that as humans, we tend to be a little bit nostalgic and we want something to happen, trying to will it into existence, when in reality, as long as K-State wins, that's all that matters.
Yeah, Casey Alexander should do what he wants to do. And I think all four of us and anybody listening can agree with that. Whatever he thinks is best is what he should do. Like we had this conversation about like Matt Wells. Should he be up on the press box or on the field? Like whatever is best for them and their interest, go for it. But I'll just say like the opinion, Ryan Gilbert's opinion is that he'll be in a better position to have success if he has a K-Stater. But at the end of the day, like you said, Big B and Cole, you know what? It is his program. Gene Taylor and his committee, what they were hiring was this guy. Let's let him do what he wants. I'm just saying, if I were asked, I would want some purple on that staff. But my opinion doesn't matter.
I get it. And I'm not trying to argue with you or argue at all. But what makes you think that he would have more success by having a K-Stater on his staff? Like,
because
what has K-State done in the last decade that says, you know what, I need to have a K-Stater on the staff because that's going to make us better? I don't think that exists.
The last number of seasons, none of these guys understand what it means to wear the K-State jersey. We could go back and pull
who they brought in. No
receipts.
You could have had 4 K-State assistant coaches that played at K-State. That wasn't going to matter. It was who they brought in. That was just the wrong choices.
I would love to go back, Big B. Now we're arguing. I'd love to go back to David Gasson. Some quotes that he said on his senior day when he talked about Curtis Kelly, for example, former player on that staff, and you bridge that gap with what it means to wear the K-State uniform. None of these guys, the last number of seasons, have had any clue what it means to wear the K-State uniform. Now, yes, that's because there is no culture in place. I'll give you that. If you build a culture in the foundation year after year, maybe you don't need that K-Stater on staff to bridge that gap of what it means to wear this jersey, because everybody in that locker room is showing you, is telling you, is giving you examples of why you work hard for this university, for Casey Alexander. But right now, there is no culture, and there will not be a culture for a couple of years. You look up the definition of what that means and what we're talking about, the continuity, that's not something that snap of a finger arrives. That's going to take a couple of years. So the next best thing that you can do right now is to bring in somebody. Heck, Jordan Henriquez was on I'm sure he's gotten to know Casey Alexander pretty well. You think he would tell these incoming Belmont players or some guy from a random power conference school that's going to transfer into K-State, what do you think who's going to be better equipped to relay that message of what you're playing for here, what this fan base is going to expect from you? Again, I'm not saying it's got to be your right-hand man as the associate head coach, but was it KJ Adams or is it KJ Adams at KU was the video guy? Perfect example. You're not doing really a whole lot of coaching, but you're still there in the locker room and talking with guys.
I don't think that's a good example bringing up KU.
Why not? He's a former KU player, Big B.
Yeah, but that's KU.
And KU has a pretty damn good program.
Be realistic though, Gills. That's not a good example.
Arizona, the best team in the country. They've got a former Arizona player on their staff as well.
Arizona to K-State. Those aren't good examples. But
you want to be the best program in the country or not?
I do, but we also have to be in reality where we're starting. And to bring up Arizona and Kansas is not a reality of where we should be comparing traditions. Let's just say that. We can be the best program in the country, and I want to be. At the same time, you have to, again, we're at ground zero. But maybe you believe, and not maybe, it seems like you believe that ground zero needs to have something from K-State. I don't think, like I said, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I'm just saying it's not a requirement to be good. That's all.
Take notes from Kansas and Arizona.
Well, sure.
Who are the best of the best.
But I don't think, because if the video guy didn't play at Kansas, you don't think Kansas would be as good?
Well, Bill, what is it? Jeremy Case is also his associate. I'm not saying you got to have that associate.
Take those two guys off. Kansas still not good?
He's always had
That's all I'm saying, Gills.
KU
it doesn't have anything to do with that, man. I'm telling you. I get what you're saying, and I'm with you. I'm just saying it's not a requirement. And Kansas State shouldn't pigeonhole itself into making it a requirement, because what if we can get the best video guy in the history of college basketball, but he went to Colgate? We shouldn't hire that guy? Of course we should. That's all I'm saying.
That's
all
a very
I'm throwing
random
out
school
there.
to bring up, Big B. Colgate. I like it.
That's all I'm saying. It's just not a requirement. We as K-State fans can't get stuck in having to do that. We should just be willing to have the best of whoever it is. It doesn't matter who they are. Just bring in the best guys for the program. That's it.
Agreed.
And leave it at that.
So, but here's my thought. In listening to him talk today, he has a really defined culture at Belmont. Part of it is what Gills is talking about. He played there. He gets Belmont. He understands it. A lot of his coaches have Belmont ties. So I get where Gills is coming from. Having a little K-State flavor might help him out to understand things. But if he can bring 2 or 3 players from Belmont and retain a guy like Taj Manning and maybe David Castillo, there's other players on this team, setting NIL discussions aside, that might fit what he wants to do. Do you want him around after being part of what that was? But if you have 3 to 5 guys that are bought into the coach and the school, okay, like Taj is bought into the school, I think David Castillo is bought into the school, then the culture is going to come. But another thing coaches do, that successful coaches do, they can identify leaders, not just players. Who's going to lead this team? Because you got to have it in basketball so much. And I don't feel like the last 2 coaches at Kansas State have understood how to construct a locker room and how to make sure you had a true leader on the floor. Barry Brown was that. Rodney Recruiter was that. Marquise Noel was that. And the only one of those that was developed by the coach was Barry Brown, developed by Bruce Weber. He inherited Rodney, and, he inherited Jerome Tang, inherited his player, Marquise. So it's bringing in the Belmont culture, I think, fits K-State quite well. Would I like to have someone on the staff from K-State? Yeah, but I'm with Big B. If he feels like some dude from another school is more important, what did you just celebrate? Then it's his staff. I don't like it when coaches are hired and then told, okay, you need to hire this guy. No, you want him to build a program, let him build the damn program. Would I prefer a K-Stater on the staff? Absolutely, for everything that Gil said, to understand this program. But, another but, are recent K-State players good advocates of the program?
No.
What I mean is, have they really felt K-State basketball at its peak? Maybe Barry, Rodney were, but a lot of these guys were around so far removed from Tex Winter and Jack Hartman and even Lon Kruger that they don't understand the culture and history of K-State basketball. The reality is K-State basketball has aged out. And what happened for 40 years in Ahern Fieldhouse no longer has any relevance. It's been smothered. It's gone. It breaks my heart to say that as an old, because the olds want it back. But if it comes back, it's going to be its own thing. It's going to be something different. Yeah, they can build off of that. The banner's still up there. If he goes to a Final Four, that will go up with all those other 4 Final Fours before I was born. So, I'm do whatever you need to do, Coach. If you're going to build a program, build a program. If you're going to recruit high schools, recruit high schools. If you want to supplement the portal, we're all in. I don't know how much NIL you'll have, but I think you'll be a better steward of that money than what we previously saw. And also by building a culture, building a program, having guys, you can do exactly what Chris Kleiman was doing in football. And I think Colin Klein will continue. If you shine as a freshman, your NIL goes up. As a sophomore, junior, you pay them what they deserve at that point. not just some random guy that you say, hey, it's going to cost me a couple $1 million to get you here, whether it's paying you or your agent or your club. Here's $2.5 million I'm spending on a guy that, well, hardly played. And I don't think that's going to happen again. I think money will be treated with much more wisdom and used as a more effective tool, even though it won't be as much. I think he'll get better out of it.
Well, if Casey Alexander has immense success in year number one, natural to believe a good part of that, a good reason for that would be the money. Now, Casey Alexander has to be smart, has to understand that success in one season, waving that magic wand, is not going to always be what works year in and year out. So if I could tell Casey Alexander one thing on here, it'd be don't let success change you. Look at Jerome Tang. Guys, Jerome Tang and his press conference, go back and watch. He was saying a lot of the same stuff that Casey Alexander said. Yeah, of course you want to build a culture and a foundation and bring guys back. But when you have that, you're number one that you have, and you go far in the NCAA tournament, it's easy to neglect what you thought when you first got hired. So Casey Alexander, regardless what happens here in year number one, stay true to what you were preaching Monday afternoon at the Shamrock facility zone. Sorry.
It's a zone.
I'm not going to make any more analogies, but I'll just say this. I keep thinking about what Casey Alexander was able to do at Belmont. And now you think about all the extra things that are going to be available to him from a recruiting standpoint, as far as like facilities, not just NIL, but all these other things too. Like it's more than just the NIL. Like I think sometimes we forget that it's hey, you get to play in the best conference in America, the second best league in America outside of the NBA, per Brett Yormark. That is exactly what he said. That is what he gets to sell. And so now not only does he get to sell his track record and, maybe even his winning track record at Kansas State if he's able to do so, but he's able to sell all of that combined with the NIL. And you'd like to think that he'd be able to have some success. And, we haven't really talked about the lack of NCAA tournament appearances at Belmont, but he did address that. And he was very honest. And he said, look, we picked a bad time to play our worst game of the year. We lost in the conference tournament and we have no chance of getting in. But again, I go back to that schedule that I read earlier in the show. They played 3 teams in the Power 4 since 2019 because nobody wants to play them. So they have no opportunity to beef up their schedule. The only way they get in is if they win their conference tournament. And, I think the more that I sit here and think about this hire, the man consistently finishes in the top 4 in his league on a consistent basis. Can he do that in the Big 12? It's a daunting task, but I will say now that he has all these extra resources available, I'm very, very interested to see if he stays on the same track, because Jerome Tang was noted as a high school recruiter. He was a fantastic high school recruiter. He had some high school recruits in the beginning, and then he shifted away from it. If Casey Alexander stays true to himself, I do believe that he will have success.
Yeah, Jerome Tang panicked, and he panicked after the first year, and then the second year went south on him, and he panicked versus just saying, you know what? He should have literally just said, I got this contract. They're not getting rid of me. Let me get back to what got me the job.
Mm-hmm.
And if he would have done that, I think there's a good chance that Jerome Tang might still be the coach, but it is what it is. Doesn't matter. Bottom line is we got a guy that I feel like he is going to stick to it because it's what he knows and he understands. Look, doing something different isn't going to make it better. I think Jerome Tang was under the realization of, you know what, I got a big war chest here of money. If I just spread that around, that'll overcome the weaknesses that I have in X's and O's. Because trust me, guys, again, I don't want to look back and I don't want to bash anybody, but anybody that watched Kansas State or watches basketball or pays attention, they know that Jerome Tang wasn't the greatest X's and O's guys. That's not what he was. Everybody understands that, and he, more importantly, understands that. Coaches know what they're good at. You don't get to this level without knowing what you're good at. Number one, you don't even get to this level without being good at something. So if you just keep exploiting what it is that got you the job, the better off you will be. More times than not, people try to change what they're doing, and think, well, I've got to do this because I've got a bigger job. No. It's kind of like coaches calling plays. Like, you got the job because you called plays. Well, now you got the head job. Well, I'm going to take a step back. Well, exactly why? That doesn't make any sense. I get you got more responsibility, but you got the job because you are an outstanding play caller, offensively or defensively. Don't step away from that and hand it to somebody else, because ultimately, at the end of the day, it's you that's responsible. Same thing here. Do what you do, which got you the job. And Cole, I love you that you brought up the fact about the NCAA tournament appearances. What are they supposed to do?
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, what are you supposed to do? It's like they were playing in the NCAA tournament, but it was just their conference tournament. If you lose, you're out and you have no chance, no matter how good you were in the regular season. That's why I always think those mid-major conferences, I've said this for years, I think their regular season should be who gets into the tournament versus their tournament. I understand it's all March Madness and we all love it, but that's a rough road to go. No, I could go 29. I mean, look what happened to Miami of Ohio. I know I'm getting off track, but Belmont had a great year. And then because they played one of their worst games of the year, now they can't go to the tournament. It's crazy.
But Miami of Ohio still went in. Now, I don't want to be coming across here, and I don't want this to be a shot at Casey Alexander Fitz. You can always win more games. You can always be better. So, yeah, you didn't have the success in March because you lost a couple games early. But if you were undefeated until your conference tournament and you were better, you're still going to get in. Belmont was 69 in Ken Palm. Miami of Ohio was 93. So the 93rd team, and I know Ken Palm's not the end-all be-all, a team like that has one loss and can squeak in, right? If you're Belmont and you go perfect until that conference tournament, you're going to be just fine. So
did you hear what you just said? Perfect. Perfect. You have to be. So if you lose one game, Miami of Ohio was the fourth last team in the field. They lost they beat Ohio in overtime. It was like 100 something to 100 something. If they lose that game, they are literally not in the NCAA tournament because they lost one game in the regular season.
Yep. I'm with you, Big B. I think these smaller conferences, these one bid tournament conferences, are making a big mistake.
Yep.
Because the Valley had a really good team in it this year. Belmont was a really good team, capable of beating teams in the tournament. They're not in because it got upset. So the Valley's going to send a lesser team to represent based on 3 or 4 days in St. Louis. I'm old, and I know that you should never judge anything by a visit to St. Louis. I think just calling in the regular season champion makes a lot of sense. Maybe go back, if you're a smaller conference, go back to the preseason tournament that you have in December of your teams, and then let the regular season count for your champion and play right up till the end, right up until, the other day. Make use of that time. I don't know, man. I know this. He came aggressively after this. He wanted to escape the one bid life. He wanted to escape being the giver for the portal. He provided the players. He never got the players because he had no money. And the reality is, this is another shot to mid-major programs. You're going to have problems retaining your players and now your coaches, because to succeed, they have to reinvent their team every year because all the best players are gone. That tells me this dude can coach because he did that.
Correct.
Now with some retention, where does that take you? I'm optimistic. There's something about this dude that I think Gene Taylor got it right. But again, we all thought that after 1 year of Jerome Tang, the greatness was on the way back. So this is a guy who's perpetuated winning over many years, has been successful every season, who understands the importance of culture in a locker room. And now he's been brought into K-State to do the same things. I think it's a great hire. And with that said, I know a lot of people wanted someone else. A lot of people are disappointed. But don't ever look at, hey, they lost in their tournament, we can't hire that guy. That's just so short-sighted to judge someone on one game. Yeah, you probably should learn this lesson. Jerome Tang beat Kentucky and Michigan State in back-to-back games in the NCAA tournament. Is that a reason to hire him? I don't think anyone's going to look at that and say that's who we're hiring here. So look at the body of work. That's what's important. And the body of work has been pretty impressive.
It's been pretty impressive, Fitz, but it could have been better. You guys are going to push back on this. I get it when I brought up Miami of Ohio, but Belmont could have been better.
Everyone wishes he'd gotten to the tournament more, no doubt. But this worked out great for K-State. That upset made all this possible. And let's be honest here. Belmont gets in the tournament, wins a couple games because they were capable of it. They could beat people. Is Casey Alexander here, or is he somewhere else? Because he's now fit the criteria of being the Cinderella in the tournament, getting to the Sweet 16. I don't know. This worked out well for K-State. They got a jump on it. The portal isn't open for another 3 weeks or so.
Yeah.
I think this is a really good situation for them to succeed within their first few years.
He fits. I'll say this, guys. I know we're getting ready to wrap up. He fits. I was very interested to see if he fit the K-State mold, right? Like, is this a guy who's going to come to work every day, with a chip on his shoulder? And I kind of got that vibe. Like, this is a guy who played NAIA basketball. He's 5'8", and he has had to grind his way to get to the top. What do you say, 17 years as a head coach? How many mid-major coaches? It takes them 17 years to become a Power Four coach. Let's not overlook that. And you're right, Ryan. Could he have won more? Yeah, he could have. But I think now that he's at this point, like, it feels like he's not the kind of be like, I'm at this point, I'm going to chill, and the work's over. I'm just going to say this. Chris Kleiman won national championships at the FCS level, but I kind of picked up a little bit of a Chris Kleiman type of vibe where he knows what it takes, and now he's ready to do that at a higher level. That's the vibe that I picked up more than anything else.
The math is the math, even if it's done with more digits. It's if you know how to do the math, you can figure it out. And I guess that's my optimism. I'm a guy that wants to be optimistic with a hire like this. Mostly because of this fact, and I figured this out today. Someone posted on one of our videos about K-State basketball, and it was correct that K-State, this is like the 27th head coach, and KU's had like 9 in history, which is that's insane. And here's what makes it particularly annoying to me, that they've had that stability. It's not a bad thing. I'm not annoyed that they've had that. It's just the fact that Casey Alexander, going back to my years with the Collegian as a student reporter, will be my 10th coach in K-State basketball I've covered. That's more than KU's had in history. And in my lifetime, from the early to mid 80s to now, it's exceeded that. There hasn't been, since Jack Hartman, a real stable force with K-State basketball. Bruce Weber was here 10 years, but it was up and down. And it took him a while after he lost Rodney Magruder to find the right guy that could repeat it, and it was Barry Brown. You got to have that guy. If you don't have that dude in your locker room that is going to show the way and lead and push his teammates, you're not going to succeed. And I think he knows that. He develops that, and he can identify those kids at the high school level and bring them in and watch them bloom. And I'm, again, pretty optimistic about what I see. Any final thoughts?
Yeah. When you're down, so after Rodney Magruder leaves, though, you're down year. It's okay to be the 8-9 seed when Shane Southwell and Roll Spradling maybe aren't budding stars, and that's not their roles, but you can get by with a 20 or 21 win season back in Bruce Weber's second year after you lose that star. So that needs to be the floor, right? We've complimented Casey Alexander a lot for 20 win seasons at Belmont. Now it's time to do that. When you're bad seasons, you're still competitive. Gene Taylor mentioned that afterwards on Monday, that, okay, you finish in the top half of the Big 12, like you're dancing. You're going to have a chance to win it all. just by being decent or average, maybe above average in your league. And so it's going to be a challenge, of course. But man, if there's one thing, just your lows cannot be that low. You got to be competitive after you lose that superstar, whether he graduates or goes elsewhere to the portal, which could very well happen, even if you have these resources in Manhattan. Managing that down year, getting your fans to still be interested, to want to show up in games. Your worst game of the year, I mentioned this on our show a couple of days back that we did with Clint, right, Fitz?
Yep.
Jacob Pullen mentioned it. You lose by 14 when it's just your off night, your bad night. You don't lose by 30 points on your home court. What was it, 3 games in a row that happened where K-State just got clowned in Bramlage? You got to be so far from that if you want to sniff success consistently in Manhattan.
I think that's the case anywhere. You're 100% right, Ryan. But that comes with building a culture that Kansas State hasn't had in a long time. You build a culture, then all of a sudden the plateaus the low points become 21 win seasons, 9-9 in the conference, scraping by to get into the NCAA tournament, but getting in as a 10 seed, not even as a play-in game. That needs to be the bar. Now, it might take a season or two to get there, and I think fans have to be patient with that. Maybe it doesn't. Who knows? I mean, again, today's day and age, man, you can change your fortunes quickly, but you still have to get back to your roots. And I think that's what Jerome Tang just didn't do. So we had super success. He thought that was the way, and he got away from what he did well. Casey Alexander, there is going to be a huge transfer turnover at Kansas State. Do not allow that to be the norm. I don't care if you win the national championship. Get back to what you do best, because if you don't, you're asking for trouble, because, again, you're not building a culture. You got to build that culture, and I agree, Ryan. That baseline has to be middle of the Big 12, getting into the NCAA tournament. That has to be where, man, that was a tough season. That's what it has to look like at Kansas State, and there is no reason at all with the support, facilities, the fans. I mean, with everything that you had, there's no reason that can't be the baseline.
Which is wild now in the current landscape of college basketball, the current landscape of the Big 12. Like, you've got your top dogs, and then you've got the teams that just kind of stink. Like UCF now is that team we're talking about. Yes. 20 wins, 500, but they just finally got to that point. Jamie Dixon finally got above 500 as that middle team in the Big 12. And so it's tough to do. It ain't easy, but, go prove me wrong, Casey Alexander.
Cool. Final thoughts?
I think this is the greatest question the greatest comment we've had from someone today from Kanye. You got to treat Bramlage like it's a fortress. Never, ever accept losing, ever.
I agree.
That's my final comment, because that has to be a priority.
And he brought it up. He brought up the student section. He brought up how rowdy the Octagon of Doom can be. He embraced that. He loves it. He said, I watched it on TV through this years. I've seen what it can be. And
that's how you make the tournament, Fitz. You win all your games at home, you're going to the tournament. I can guarantee you that.
Defend that place like it truly is your home. And again, I come back to this as we close out the show. I kind of feel like the previous 4 years, nobody saw Bramlage as their home. It's just where they were playing at that year, at that moment in their life. And I think it ended up being reflected dramatically in the product. And if you don't take pride in where you play or for whom you play, you don't take pride in how you play. And that's what we ended up with at Kansas State. Casey Alexander comes in, the 27th head coach in K-State history. Now the work begins, building a staff, beginning to construct a roster, and build that program that he talked about so much in Monday's press conference. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Thank you for watching the K-State Insiders. This has been a GoPowercat.com and Spirit Street production.